Welcome back to another Fantasy Tour de France video. Today I'm going to be recapping the last two stages, stages 10 and 11, and looking ahead to stage 12 tomorrow, as well as the rest of the race. I'm going to keep the recaps a little bit quicker than in my previous videos, so let's jump straight in. Stage 10 was the first real mountain stage. It was a medium mountain stage, not necessarily a big GC day, but it was our first opportunity to see who really had legs. Simon Yates, who was in the breakaway as a satellite rider for Vingegaard, which didn't end up being necessary in today's stage. He won the stage after, resting at the back of the breakaway for most of the day. But notably, Ben Healy was able to, coming in third, was able to stay in the front of the race long enough to take the yellow jersey by 30 seconds ahead of Pogacar. He looked really, really strong. Even though he was pulling himself for the last, 30 Ks or whatever, he was incredibly strong, and I'm very interested to see how he does up in the mountains. Notably, Vauquelin lost some time on the other main competitors. Not too much else noteworthy here. There were some withdrawals. Marin Vandenberg, Georg Zimmermann, and Soren Werenskold all dropped out. Not too much noteworthy in the fantasy points. Obviously, the breakaway riders picked up the majority of the points on offer on the stage, especially considering the breakaway won. So not too much to talk about. Tadej Pogacar was the highest scorer of the rest. If we look at jersey points, Ben Healy is actually the highest jersey point scorer after this stage with 100, ahead of Pogacar even, and of course that makes him the most efficient in terms of points per star cost. Lucky enough, in my fantasy team, I had picked up Ben Healy right before this stage. I'm really happy with that pickup. I wasn't quite brave enough to put him as my stage winner bonus for the day, but a lot of people did, and a lot of people jumped way up in the standings because of that. You can see that the day before I had Milan in this slot, and we had kind of left the sprinting stage of the tour. So a lot of people swapped out their remaining sprinters for some climbers. So I'm glad I picked up Healy. I'm still holding on to Pogacar, Vingegaard, Vauquelin, Abrahamsen, as well as Grignard and Verchet. But I also picked up Pablo Castrillo in this slot the day before. I had Alexis Renard, who is more of a sprinter guy. I don't expect him to be doing much for the next week. I was happy to have him as well, given he was in the breakaway for almost 100 kilometers. Looking at stage 11 today, it was in theory a flat stage, but you can note there's a whole bunch of short little punchy climbs in the finale. So it was unlikely to be one for the pure sprinters. It was never really in play for them. The question was just, would the breakaway win, or would the GC guys reel them in the finale? And we were treated to a real exceptional display from Jonas Abrahamsen and Mauro Schmidt, who went away the last of the breakaway riders of the whole day. Both of them were in the front row at the start. And, I want to shout out Emu, one of the members of our Discord server, had posted in our Discord server this morning. Mauro Schmidt, Jonas Abrahamsen, and one or two other guys are in the front row, chomping at the bit, ready to jump away into the break as soon as the flag gets waved. And it was right. They both attacked from the start, and they both ended up finishing 1-2 on the stage, just barely holding off Matthew Van der Poel, who was just 7 seconds behind them, trying to bridge across for quite some kilometers and wasn't able to make it. Really happy for Jonas Abrahamsen. If you don't know much about his story, look it up. It's a really interesting story in navigating the pro cycling world, actually putting on 20 kilograms, which goes against what most people will advise a young rider trying to break into the pro peloton to do. But it's panned out for him very well, even and especially with the broken collarbone less than a month ago, just a couple weeks before the tour. So really happy for him. And I'm also really happy that I still have him on my team. For stage 11, I didn't make any changes. I wasn't awake to see the intel, and I'm not sure that I even would have had the guts to put him as my stage winner bonus if I had seen Emu's note. But a lot of people did, and a lot of people jumped way up in the global standings by doubling up Abrahamsen today. So this just goes to show patience pays off. For the cheaper riders on your team, you only need them to perform well in a couple stages across the whole tour to make it worthwhile. So if they're not doing something even for a week, don't necessarily be quick to trade them off your team just to get rid of them. You should just trade the cheap riders off your team as you need to free up stars or free up slots for other big trades that you want to make, like, for example, picking up Healy, like I did the day before. In the GC, nothing really noteworthy happened on today's stage, no major shakeups at the front. Of course, Tadej Pogacar did crash in the last 4 or 5 kilometers, so that was quite scary, but he does look to be doing pretty okay. So hopefully he's able to recover The man's a tank. I think it's not going to affect him, and I expect tomorrow he'll be on top form. Looking at the fantasy points for the day, again, there's not too much to be surprised by. Jonas Abrahamsson, Mauro Schmidt, other breakaway riders are at the top of the standings for the day. Something interesting to look at, though, is just looking at where we are heading into our first really big mountain day. What are the jersey points looking like, and who are the most efficient riders in terms of those jersey points? So, of course, Ben Healy is earning 97 points, and at a star value of 15, he's the most efficient. But there's a couple interesting guys that are right up in the mix with the other big guys, notably Quinn Simmons, Anders Holland Johansson, and now Jonas Abrahamsson. So these guys aren't scoring all that many points, just 32, 17, 21. However, because they're so cheap, they're 7, 10, and 13 respectively, they're actually quite efficient at the moment. And so Jonas Abrahamsson, I don't expect him to keep his position in these standings too much longer, but I certainly expect Anders Holland Johansson to at least maintain his current positions and maybe even bump up a little bit. And Quinn Simmons, he's shown that he's one of the strongest riders in the race right now. So depending on how much babysitting he has to do for Skelmos, he might continue to earn a lot of points over the course of the next week. We'll have to see. I've got my eyes on these three guys. There were no additional withdrawals today, which is nice. Looking at my fantasy team, I didn't make any trades from yesterday to today, but I'm certainly going to be making at least one trade from today heading into tomorrow. So let's look ahead at where we're at in the race. So we made it through the first week, an extended week, because they put the rest day on a Tuesday instead of a Monday in order to have a mountain stage on Bastille Day, the 14th of July. So we've already had, we already had 10 stages before we got to the first rest day, got through the flat and hilly stages. We had our first medium mountain stage, had another flat stage, but now we really begin the phase of the race where the Tour de France is going to be won. We got a mountain stage tomorrow, followed by a mountain time trial, another mountain stage, a hilly stage with a Cat 2 climb, another mountain stage, a flat stage, mountain, mountain, hilly, flat. So in the rest of the tour, we're going to have at least 6 big mountain days that are going to be impactful for the overall competition. And these are the stages where having your team composition built correctly is incredibly important, more important than exactly which riders you have on your team. So if you have, over the course of this next week and a half, if you have one climber outside of the leaders versus someone else who has 3 climbers, it's going to be so hard to make up that gap if you're still holding on to sprinters. And note, in this context, I'm not talking about riders that are classified as climbers. I just mean riders that are going to be active in the big climbs. So let's talk about what that would look like. So first of all, looking ahead to stage 12, you can see we finish up the Hautacam. It's going to be a mountaintop finish. It's a long 13, 14 kilometer climb. This is where the big guys are going to be separated from the rest. So certainly this is going to be an opportunity for us to see who is the best of the rest beyond the big two. If we look at the betting odds for the day, Tadej Pogacar is a huge, huge favorite at minus 115, followed by Jonas Vingegaard, who's a fair bit behind at plus 300, and then a huge gap to anyone else. Matthias Skelmos is in third. I'm not 100% sure why the bookies like Skelmos so much. People were talking about it in the Discord today. I don't have any intel. If you were going to bet on Skelmos, or if you have him on your team and you're thinking about taking a big risk by putting him as your stage winner bonus, you should do some more research to figure out what's driving this trend, because I haven't quite seen it yet in this tour. One of the reasons why Jonas's stocks are going up at the moment is I think people are betting on whether or not the crash today affected Pogacar, whether he'll either not be fully recovered for tomorrow, not very likely. I think he had a pretty easy day today, or more likely, he will just choose not to be as aggressive and attacking as he might have otherwise if he wasn't nursing a little bit of a sore body from the crash today. So some things that I want to look at for tomorrow, I want to see, first of all, how is Healy doing? Is he able to maintain his position in GC? Probably not, but how far back does he fall? If he only falls like 2 positions, he's still going to be earning a ton of points towards the yellow and white jerseys. If he falls 12 positions, we're probably going to be looking to get rid of him. If he falls 20 positions, that's maybe even a best case scenario, because it means he's back on the attack. He's far enough out of GC that we'll be able to see him in the break. So I'm interested to see that. I'm also interested to see how Lenny Martinez's legs are faring because he's made it really clear that he's targeting the polka dot jersey. So a lot of people have picked him up. I haven't yet. I went with Healy over Lenny, but part of that is because I just felt like Healy had better legs. Now that we're getting to the big mountains, this is the place where, in theory, Lenny should shine a little bit more than Ben. But now that Ben is going to be focusing on GC at least for the next stage or two, I'm interested to see if Lenny can hang with the other big climbers in the breakaways going for these KOM points. Because if he can, we're going to want to contort our teams to try to pick him up as soon as we can. But tomorrow's the real tester for Lenny. I also want to see who else is fighting for polka dots. People have talked about Storer. Quinn Simmons could go for it. I don't see that happening, but it's possible. Woods expressed some intention on the mountain stage the other day, but didn't seem to have the legs. And any number of other riders could, have a good day and decide if they get a couple big KOMs tomorrow, they're going to go for it after that. So I'm going to be looking for that. But it's not just who's fighting for polka dots; it's who's fighting for polka dots and has good legs and is going to be able to consistently get into the break and then perform against the other break riders over the course of these next, 5 big mountain stages. Another thing I want to look at is how Matteo Jorgensen looks, both in terms of his form, but also how the team's using him on this first big mountain day. If they're using him to roll attacks constantly with Pogacar, frankly, that's probably the best strategy for Jonas Vingegaard to win the Tour. But if that's the case, then stocks go down a bit for Matteo as an individual rider in the fantasy game. However, if he's just going to be helping to pull and keep the main group together and push hard until the eventual attacks come from either Jonas or Tade, and it's a little bit more of a passive keep yourself into contention while you're helping Jonas passively. If that's more of his role, then he might be a rider that could potentially be the biggest non-leader classified rider in the fantasy game. So he's certainly someone that we should at least be looking at on our teams. If we need to pick up Matteo after tomorrow, how would we do that? What trades would we have to make and can we afford it? The final thing I'm going to be looking at is Johannesson, but not this Johannesson, the other Johannesson, Anders, way the heck down here. Anders Johannesson only cost 7 stars, and he's one of those 7-star riders that I was thinking at the beginning of the tour was best value, but I didn't pick him up initially because I expect him to really come into his own in the mountains more so than in the first week. So now we're in the mountains, so I'm going to be really interested to see, is he eager to get in the break tomorrow? If he does, how do his legs fare, and can we expect more from him over the next week and a half? So he's another rider I'm looking at. Now, in terms of the actual strategy for tomorrow, I've already made one trade, and that is I sold Kevin Vauquelin to pick up Remco Evenepoel. Because my first advice to everyone here is if you don't have 3 big leaders today, you probably want to pick them up. I consider Pogacar a must-have on everyone's team, of course. I also think, as of tonight, Vingegaard is a must-have on everyone's team. If you have any reasonable amount of trades remaining, you really want to try to get Vingegaard because he's likely to be someone that you hold for the rest of the tour. And tomorrow's the day that he could come second and potentially even win if Pogacar has a bad day. So definitely you want these two. Now for your third leader, and again, this is all predicated on how many you trades have left. How many trades you have left. If you don't have many left, then you have to, be a little bit more cautious and maybe wait for tomorrow's results to come in for you to see who is that third big leader that you want to hold for the rest of the tour. I have enough trades left that even after selling Vauquelin today, I have 4 more trades that I can make with these 200 credits. So I felt confident picking up Evenepoel today, knowing that if he doesn't end up being the third best climber in the race, I can sell him and pick up any other climber in the entire race for his cost or less than that. So I'm comfortable making a bet on Evenepoel today. But if you're short on trades, you might want to just keep whoever you have on this slot and wait till the news comes in tomorrow for which leader is going to be best. I expect the GC group to win tomorrow, and that means I expect Pogacar to win, so he's the stage win bonus. Everyone should have stage win bonus on Pog unless you really know what you're doing. If you get some intel, you have a really good feeling about Vingegaard, there's something that's said in the media tomorrow morning before the stage starts, whatever, that's defensible. But if you're not, doubling one of those guys, then I don't know what you're doing. It's possible if you have Lenny Martinez on your team, you might want to double him, but I still think that's a lot more risky because he's not likely to win the stage, and his KOM and breakaway points are not super likely to exceed Pogacar's stage win points. I'm very curious to see how Onley does tomorrow as well, because he is someone that if he's got as good legs in the high mountains as he's had on the shorter climbs earlier in this race, he might end up being our best third leader for the rest of the tour, in which case we free up a ton of points to pick up some other climbers. I also, maybe it should go without saying, but given I traded him today, I expect Vauquelin to fall out of the GC, at least the top of the standings tomorrow. Maybe he'll become a stage hunter, or maybe he'll still stay in looking for that top 10, top 15, etc. But I don't think he's a good hold after today. Again, it goes without saying, I hope, but if you still have any big expensive sprinters like Milan, Merlier, or even Van der Poel, get rid of them. We're not in their terrain, and you cannot afford to have that many stars tied up on a rider who's not going to be scoring a lot of points every day. You definitely want to use those points towards some of the big climbers. Now, importantly, if you have any middle cost climbers, like for example, I have Pablo Castrillo, even if they're not your top pick right now, given what you've seen so far in the race, I do not recommend that you sell them. A lot of people have been asking me in the Discord server, should I change, Castrillo for Simmons or Storer for Schmidt or whatever? No. The answer is always no. Right now, trades are so valuable. These credits are the most important currency in this game. You want to be spending your trades to change the profile of your team rather than just slightly improve the quality of one of the riders on your team. So let's say instead of Healy here, I had Storer. I think Healy's a better hold than I think Storer is. I might be proven wrong, or I might have a different opinion tomorrow. But right now, I like Healy better than Storer. If I had Storer right here, there's no way in hell I would sell him for Healy, because I'd be getting rid of one rider and replacing them with a rider of a similar type and cost. Let's say hypothetically, Storer we know he's going to score less points than Healy will over the next week. Well, it would have to be a lot less points for me to feel confident trading him out, because if I'm wrong, let's say I trade him Storer out for Healy, and then I'm wrong and I have to trade Healy again for someone else, that's two trades. I would be better off just accepting that I've got the lower scoring Storer, the lower scorer for the next week, and use those two trades instead to swap out whoever's the worst of the big three leaders, swap them out for Jonathan Milan on stage 17 or whatever that next sprint stage is, and then swap him back to a leader. That's a trade that I'm much happier to make, knowing that it's pretty likely that I'm going to get 400 plus points from those two trades. Whereas it's not clear at all that just swapping one marginal climber for another marginal climber will save you those 300 or 400 points. Now, that said, on the topic of Healy, I do think he's a good hold, because at the minute he's still scoring 97 points just from the Jersey competitions each day. This is going to be less tomorrow, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot less, and he's still cheaper than the other big riders that are going to be ahead of him in the general classification as of tomorrow. So I like holding Healy. I'm not ready to get rid of him. About Abrahamsen, he did really great today, but we're kind of leaving his territory into the mountains here. However, I'm not yet going to get rid of him for two reasons. One, he might be a good hold until stage 15. He might go in the breakaway again on stage 15, maybe even stage 17. That's a possibility. We'll have to see how it plays out. But the other thing is, I'm expecting that I will probably want to swap him out for another climber at some point. And that might be a double trade with one of these other riders, or it might be a single trade for a cheap climber. Like, for example, it could be Jonas Abrahamsen for Anders Holland Johannesson, who only costs 7 stars, which would free up 3 stars for me, which would allow me to upgrade Healy to Jorgensen when the time comes, who costs 18 stars. So I'm going to wait. Even though I don't think Abrahamsen's a really important hold right now, I don't think it's worth spending one of my 4 remaining trades to get rid of him until I have more information. It is worth me getting rid of Vauquelin for Evenepoel, because I expect Evenepoel to score a bunch of points tomorrow, but it's not yet worth me spending a trade to get rid of Abrahamsen. That's the biggest advice I'll give you. If you're thinking about trading one mid-cost climber for another mid-cost climber, patience. Just wait. See how things play out. As long as you've got 3 big leaders and you don't have a sprinter or a Mathieu van der Poel, and instead you've filled out the rest of your mid-cost riders with climbers, you'll be fine. All right, that's all I got today. Good luck to everyone. Really excited to see what happens tomorrow. It should be an interesting stage, and I'll check in with you in another couple days. Take care.